Good morning. Welcome to St. Paul's Universalist Church. Glad to see at least those gathered here dug their way out. I felt like, you know how you order those things and there's a delay and a delay and a delay, and you just kind of find another way of doing it, and then it shows up on your doorstep and you're thinking, I don't need this anymore. I don't want this anymore. And yet there's no way to return it. So that's what yesterday felt like. Anyway, if the weather forecasts are to be believed, by this time next week, much of this, if not all of it, will be gone. But glad you made it in today. In the way of announcements, this coming Thursday, we will have a commemoration of Maundy Thursday at 6:30 here in the sanctuary. It will feature a traditional communion service. There's a sign up on the back table for Easter flowers. Please put your name there if you would like to sign up for those. Are there any other announcements anyone wishes to share with the congregation? Okay, let us proceed to our choir call to worship.
Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King.
I open our service this morning with these words of Daniel Chesney Cantor. Today, we begin the walk to Jerusalem, the Holy Week, the demand that we face the broken path, the abuse of power. Today, we walk toward the day spring breaking through, the Easter day of joy. So let us prepare the way. Let us join together this morning in worship, to see what holiness resides within and about us, to welcome in the day, and to make straight the path for the work of God. Let us worship together. And as is our tradition, we open our services with the lighting of our chalice. Please join me in the words. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage. And our opening song is number 262.
Oh
Reformation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another and with our God. We are now at the time of the service where we share joys, sorrows, and concerns.
So this is a joy. First off, Mary sends her love and thanks you for her cards that she received, her Easter cards and get well cards. And with that being said, she had a checkup a few weeks ago and her knee seems to be healed on its own. So there's no surgery. She doesn't have a cast anymore. She still has a small little, protection to wear around it, but she's starting to walk more and back to where she's supposed to be. I'm wrapping her in a bubble. Yesterday was my mother's birthday. She would have been 87.
This is both my father's birthday too, but my concern for Dick's operation tomorrow, 10:45 will be there, and prayers are welcome.
My cousin Tom Hyla is having surgery on his shoulder on the 3rd, so keep him in your prayers and thoughts.
Seems like I light a candle for this recently. Every time I'm in the pulpit, prayers for peace between Ukraine and Russia, between Israel and Gaza. Of course, anybody that looks at the back wall knows that we do respect the teachings of all religions, being Easter time focuses on Christianity. But it is not lost on me as I was preparing this week's service. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew making his way into the city of Jerusalem. It's kind of interesting. Someone from Palestine going into the holy city to speak truth to power, among other things. And as always, we light a final candle for any joys, sorrows, or concerns that go unspoken but remain in our hearts and minds. And we will now give and receive the morning offering to support the work, the wonder, and the witness of this community. invite you to now join me in a time of prayerful meditation. These are the words of David Johnson. You who are the soul and heart of life, save us from fear. The fear of days and nights yet to be. The fear of the known and the unknown. The fear that builds high walls around our spirits and our lives. The fear that closes in and envelops us. The fear that nibbles at the edges of every satisfaction. Free us from fear of failure and success, of shame and pain, of death and fear of life as well. Open our eyes that we may see your glory in humbleness and simplicity, commonness strewn generously across our path all our days. May we recognize you riding upon a simple beast of burden down the crooked streets of Jerusalem. May we not require the palms of victory and praise, the accolades and shouts of the multitude to see your glory in gentleness, patience, loving kindness, and yes, pain and sometimes even death. Your way of peace, of faith, hope, and love, still is our path, our joy, and our way. Amen. Let us now share a moment of silence where we listen to the wisdom of our hearts and minds. Our next song is number 263. Hopefully these lines all line up. I have several four-legged assistants who tend to sit on me while I'm working on these. they're cute as buttons, but they're not particularly helpful in other regards. Anyway, one of my oldest, dearest friends is one John Michael Decker. And we met at a Presbyterian church camp in 1983. Though John had been raised Catholic, he was there with a couple other boys who had, been attending the camp from his hometown of Lake Luzerne. Now, I didn't attend a Catholic Mass until I went with Dawn and her family when we were dating in college. I remember, was it Father Sturby? Yes. He would come out with the water, and poor Dawn has heard this story 100 times. So, Dawn's great aunt was here, and I was here, and Dawn was here, and I swear he would miss me with that water, because he knew I was Protestant. I don't know if he was afraid it was going to go, sorry, yeah, and all that stuff. Anyway. A few years after, meeting my friend John, who I still know, and attending a couple of masses with Dawn and her aunt and uncle, my friend John and I were talking, as we often do, and the topic of church came up, and what it meant to be raised Protestant versus Catholic. And it was an interesting contrast. My observation was that Catholic services were kind of over the top as far as rituals and imagery, while John had said that he felt that Protestant services lacked a certain amount of pageantry. He once said to me, in a Protestant church, Jeff, you see a cross. But in a Catholic church, you see your Lord and Savior suffering and dying for you on that cross. The technical difference is a bare cross as opposed to a cross with Jesus on it, also known as a crucifix. Anyway, the week between Palm Sunday and Easter traditionally focuses on the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, followed by the Last Supper, his betrayal, his arrest, his torture at the hands of the Roman authorities, and his crucifixion. Historically, there has often been a lot of emphasis on the suffering of Jesus. In traditional Christianity, the idea that this innocent man suffered and died for the sins of humankind is one of the cornerstones of the faith. Incidentally, it's also at the heart of traditional universalism, which, of course, traces its origins back to Christianity. But why all this emphasis on suffering? That was a question posed by Father James Martin, a well-known progressive Jesuit priest and author whose writings were the inspiration for this sermon. Father Martin made note of the same differences, it's what caught my eye among other things, that my friend John and I discussed all those years ago. And he goes so far as to say that non-Catholics could be forgiven for looking at a crucifix and other images and thinking that Catholicism is either morbidly fixated on suffering or a death cult, which of course it is not, but if you were just coming in and knew nothing else. The cross is so symbolic of a major world religion that we sometimes forget, because we associate it with, Christianity and the Easter story, the resurrection. But we sometimes forget that this was a form of gruesome execution. To put it in perspective, had the story of Easter been told a couple thousand years later, you might see a hangman's noose or an electric chair being a religious symbol. We don't think of it that way, but that's kind of what it is. Although some New Testament accounts record that Jesus predicted his own death, they also record that he tried to avoid it. It wasn't something he was eager to rush headlong into. In Luke's gospel, when Jesus reveals that he is the Messiah in his hometown of Nazareth, the people try to throw him off a cliff for his blasphemy, but he escapes. In John's gospel, the Jewish authorities want to arrest Jesus when he claims to be one with the Father and to stone him to death, again, for the crime of blasphemy. But again, he escapes. And even the night he is arrested, in Gethsemane, he prays to God, "Take this cup from my lips," to avoid the fate that awaits him. Like any one of us would have done, I think he tried to avoid suffering and death. No one wants to suffer and die. Father Mark writes that aside from the fact that the Holy Week events lead to the Easter story itself, there are two reasons, perhaps, for the emphasis on the suffering of Jesus. One historical and one spiritual, though the two overlap to a certain degree. From an historical standpoint, there was a strong need for the early church, the first century church, to explain the idea that the Messiah, that the Son of God, was executed in so brutal a manner. Because crucifixion was reserved largely for low-life criminals or enemies of the state. And it was meant to be slow, painful, and to serve as an example to those who would oppose Roman authority. Not only was it a terrible, humiliating way for Jesus to die, but the early church also had to contend with the ideas that part of what led to that crucifixion was betrayal by one of his own followers and the abandonment of his other followers. They all scattered, like, what's going on? It's like, this was supposed to be something great, but he got arrested. What are we going to do? And in some accounts that he was crucified, it wasn't like a singular thing. I mean, the place he went was a place of crucifixion. There were two thieves on either side of him. So that's the historical context, trying to, make sense of those things happening to the central figure of the story. From a spiritual perspective, we have to remember that the events we are talking about are often referred to as the Passion. This term comes from the Greek word pascho, which means to experience or to suffer. And it is that aspect that ties into the title of this sermon and also the article I was inspired by, which is that Jesus understands you. Why? Why does Jesus understand you? Why and how could someone living in the Middle East 2,000 years ago possibly identify with you? How could you possibly identify with him? I'm talking millennia. And part of the reason is because it speaks to a notion, a powerful notion, and that is to emphasize that Jesus knew what it was to be human. And part of the human condition that we all share, that we wish we didn't share, that we wish we didn't experience, is that we know what it is to suffer. Hopefully, none of us will ever have to experience torture and execution. But, apart from that, we know how it feels to be betrayed. We know how it feels to be abandoned. We know how it feels to be misunderstood. And Beyond all that, as a human being, Jesus would have known illness, pain, hunger, thirst, fatigue, doubt, anger, and sadness. For example, just focusing on the hurt and sadness, his father Joseph is never mentioned after Jesus' childhood. One could assume that was because he had died before Jesus had begun his public ministry. So he would have known what it was like to lose a parent. Even though he purportedly raised his friend Lazarus from the dead, he nonetheless mourned the loss when he first heard of it. And he was devastated when he learned that his cousin, John the Baptist, had been executed. Because of his tremendous influence on history and religion, and because of his divine nature, which I realize that we as Unitarian Universalists have a variety of opinions about, I think that there is a tendency to put Jesus up here. But remembering that Jesus was human as well makes him much more accessible and relatable to our own experiences of humanity. The events of the Easter story show that Jesus suffered on almost every level. Emotionally, he was betrayed by one of his closest friends and abandoned by his followers. Physically, he was beaten nearly to death, has a crown of thorns jammed on his head, has to drag his own cross up a hill, and is then nailed to it. And spiritually, after devoting his life to spreading God's message, to talk about the coming of the kingdom, he ends up nailed to a cross, executed. Seems like it was all in vain at that point. He feels despair, crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, perhaps our lives are not so dramatic and tumultuous, but we too know something of emotional, physical, and spiritual suffering. They are facts of life. So in that way, perhaps, we do understand what he went through, and if he were here, would understand what we went through. So as we make our way toward Easter, I would ask you to reflect on this idea of a teacher, a prophet, a possibly divine being, who we can relate to because he, like us, knew what it was to be human, with all the joys, sorrows, trials, and triumphs that come with experiencing the human condition. Something to think about. Our closing hymn is number 344.
Promise through the ages rings that always, always
Thank you for coming out today. If you are so inclined, please join us for coffee hour. Warm up before you go back out to, it's funny, the song mentioned the cold December days. It feels like it. I close our service with the words of David Rankin, who reminds us that Palm Sunday is found whenever we are serving a noble and unpopular cause with selfless devotion, holding to the ideals of truth and justice, whenever we are seeking to uplift the fallen, to comfort the brokenhearted, to strengthen and encourage the weak and hopeless, whenever we are working bravely and persistently in the face of abuse and criticism to establish more equitable relations in the world, whenever we are sacrificing our lives in behalf of what we believe to be the service of love for all humanity. That is Palm Sunday. Please join me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across